Hey, Ironman, welcome back to the Grove for our first session of our new series. We're going to be going through a book called Get Your Life Back. I'm excited about this book, but when I first thought about what our next series was going to be, this was not it. I was in Mississippi back in May, and I was helping my sister move some boxes, and she was getting ready to move to a new house. And she showed me this book. She's a big John Eldredge fan, and she said, "You might want to check this out." So I read it. And I still wasn't convinced because the timing of it felt a little bit weird. It's a book about slowing down. And back in May was when we were at our ultimate slow down time. So it made me think, is this really the right time? But now as we're getting back into life and things are starting to ramp up again, I can already tell that I'm sort of mourning the quiet times and the slow times that I had in my life, as now that we're back to work, more normal hours. I'm sure it's this way for some of you. We're back at church here. Men's group started meeting last week in person. We got a kids soccer league that's going to start up again in October. We got softball that's going to be starting in October. So up here at the Grove. So things are starting to get back to normal, as I'm sure they are for you too. So I wanted to go through this book after all. And I think there are a lot of important things that we need to think about as we start going through this, getting our life back. And it seems like so many of us are in a hurry to get our life back to normal, and it makes us stop and think, what actually is normal? What does normal feel like? And should we be in such a hurry to get back to the frantic and hectic pace that we were at before all of this COVID hit? So what we're going to be looking at today are a couple of things. One is called the 1 minute pause, and the second one is called Benevolent Detachment. But before we get into that, I want to read the first scripture verse. Comes from Matthew 11, verse 28. I'm going to read part of this. It says from the Message version, "Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." Well, you can get your life back, and we can learn to live freely and lightly. And even if you are working less hours, there's a lot that's on our hearts and our souls right now, with elections coming up, with COVID going on, with just wearing masks everywhere we go, and things aren't free and light as they used to be. The world is sort of a harsh place right now. A lot of confrontations over different things, but God is gentle, and He knows what it's like to get our life back and get the kind of life that He wants us to have. We just need to place ourselves in a position where we can receive it. As a basketball coach, I used to talk to my players about putting yourself in a position to score, and I'm sure some of you have played soccer and other sports will realize that too. Unless you're in the right spot, God's not going to use you, and if your heart's not right, you're not going to be able to learn through this process. David wrote in the book of Psalms 131, verse 2, he says, "I have calmed and quieted myself." I wonder how many people that have a peace about them where they look quiet and calm. Are their hearts cultivated and quiet? Guys that you see at the gym and on the road and in different places, do you think they have a calm and quiet and cultivated heart that God can use? When I think about cultivated, I think about our land here that we have. I'm looking out the window right here, here at the Grove, that it's hard. And if we don't cultivate it, they have the disc it out here just so that the water will go in and keep the weeds down. If we don't cultivate it, if we don't take care of it and water it gently and slowly, the water just rushes off. We have a lot of those kind of things that go on around here. We have flash floods every time it rains here in Arizona because the land is not ready for it. So we have to get our hearts in a position where God can use us. The desert fathers, as they called them, the monks of the old days, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, would get away from their hectic life to be closer to God, to have a quiet time with Him on a regular basis. In fact, one of the original monks said this. He said, they saw the world as a shipwreck from which every man had to swim for their life. And if you think about it back then, this goes without saying, obviously, but think about this. They had no cell phone, they had no internet, they had no cars, they had no traffic jams, they had no media, they had no social media, they had no political ads on television. all of these things that just stir up just so much anxiety and angst with us, they didn't have any of these things. They walked everywhere they went. They sat around and talked around dinner tables together, and yet they still felt like they needed to get away. Their life literally moved at 3 miles per hour. When they walked somewhere, that's how long, that's how fast they were going. But they felt like the life was getting sucked out of them, so they decided to do something about it. One of the things I like to do, I've got this old truck that I drive. It's part my son's, it's part mine. We bought it together. It's a 1989 Ford F-150, 5-speed, stick shift. And everywhere I go in that thing, I have to go slow, just because mechanically it's okay, but it's just a slow riding truck. I can't talk on the phone when I'm driving in it because I'm busy with the stick shift. The speedometer doesn't work, so I'm not sure how fast I'm going when I'm riding. It's just a cool old cruiser type truck, and it forces me to slow down. I have no inclination to try to beat somebody off the line when I'm driving down the road. I go extra slow because I'm not sure how fast I'm going. I look around at the other traffic and try to keep pace, but really we shouldn't even be like that, and we look at that as an analogy in life. Let's don't look at the pace that everybody else is going. Let's go at the pace that we want to go at and the one that we feel comfortable at. And so we live in this sort of insane hour, and I want you to work with me here, and let's adopt a couple of practices as we get going. Most of us just need something that's going to help us live a little less rattled. And I say that in that you may not feel rattled right now, and your life may not feel hectic right now, but let's just look at it. We're trending in that position. We're going to be back full speed before we know it. And the first thing I want to talk about is the 1-minute pause. They talk about this in this book that we're going through, and it's very simple. And in fact, I had some stickers made that we're going to show you a picture of right here. And I put God pause on these stickers. And what I want our men to do, and I had a bunch of them printed off, and I'm going to give them out to the guys, is when you pull into your driveway, okay, stop and pause. When you are getting ready to go to work, stop and pause in the morning. When you get up from watching the news, or when you are getting ready to, scold one of your kids for something, stop and pause. And we're going to call that a God pause. It just gives our soul a little bit of space, but it can be really effective. And if you ever go through this, and if you stop and pause and pray, and ask God to bring you peace as you enter your house, peace as you go to work, a 1 minute feels like a long time these days as you sit there and you go through this. In fact, this guy, John Eldredge, the author, came up with an app where he calls it the 1 minute pause. And he has like some, different days, or it has these beautiful nature scenes, and it has little mantras that you kind of, that you repeat after him about, God, I give this to you. God, I release this to you. And it's really great, and it feels like you're doing this for a long time, even though it's only a minute. But the God pause can be used in many ways, and one of them, too, is just enjoying a moment of beauty wherever you are. If you're out for a hike, or you're doing something outside, like when I'm golfing or whatever, or taking my dog for a walk, you stop and you actually pay attention to the beauty that God has put around us. My wife is way better at this. We'll go for a walk and she drives me crazy. She gets a phone out and she's taking pictures of small flowers and this and that. And I say, why are you doing that? Like, who are you going to share that with? She said, I don't care who I share with. I think it's beautiful and I'm going to take a picture of it. Like none of your business type thing. But stop and enjoy the beauty. So pick 1 or 2 moments in your day when you know you're going to be less likely to be interrupted. You don't have to God pause all day long. That's the one thing why I gave them a sticker. Stick it on your laptop before you have a difficult email you have to send out. Stick it on the back of your cell phone so that you know that every conversation that you have will be what God wants it to be. Or put it on if you've got road rage, put it on your speedometer so that when you're driving, or somewhere in your car, that you remember to be a godlike influence in our world. So that while you've got that God pause going, we're going to look at this other more internal type thing. That was an external. We're going to look at this thing called benevolent detachment. And I want to start by reading this verse from Mark 1:35 through 38. It says this: very early in the morning, while it was dark, Jesus got up and he left the house. And he went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus replied, let's go somewhere else. Now, when we usually go through that scripture, we focus on the first part about God, about Jesus getting up early and going and spending time in prayer. And when we try to encourage our men to do these kind of practices, we point to this. But I love the part where Jesus replied, or where Peter says, hey, everybody's looking for you. And he says, let's go somewhere else. You know, he's not tied to that. He's not tied to the needs and the problems of other people all of the time. He knows that God's got things under control. So Jesus models this freedom of heart that I love, that I think all of us need to have. He had this ability to disengage from what was going on around him. And when we turn to Jesus and try to get some peace, we need to just say to him, God, I'm going to give this to you. I'm going to release this to you. I'm going to give these people to you. But I'm struck by how difficult this is, because once we really get worked up and we get anxious and we have genuine concern about things, it's hard to release things. So we need to detach our problem. It feels like Velcro sometimes. We just can't get rid of it. We want to hang on to all of these concerns. I think about Peter when he was sinking, when he was walking on the water and Jesus was calling him to walk to him. You know, Peter didn't have time, and Jesus didn't offer any kind of, perspective or talk him through it or anything. He just reached down and picked him up and lifted him out. When he was anxious and when he was drowning, and that's how we feel sometimes, he just reached up and let Jesus pull him out. And I'm sure they talked about it after the fact, but when it's going on and you're in the midst of it and you feel like you're drowning, just put your hand up and let Jesus help you. So trust first, and we'll get the explanation later. Trust God first. So with benevolent detachment, we're talking about making room in our lives for God. Okay, we're getting rid of stuff that we don't need so that we can have more room for the things that we do need. So this is an internal way, like the external way was for the 1 minute pause. So we can do this as well. How often has your soul or your heart and your mind felt like one of those junk drawers that you got at your house? I'm sure you have one of these. Everybody's got one. You know, you open the drawer and it's got, at my house, it's like golf balls and tees, and it's got charging cords and coupons, and it's got pencils and pens and things that you think, business cards you think you might use one day. But that's how our souls start accumulating things as well. We're like a magnet drawing these things in. Augustine said this. He says, we must empty ourselves of all the things that fill us so that we may be filled with what we are empty of. So we need to empty our minds and our brains and our souls of things that we don't need to deal with anymore. And let's give those to God. I'm sure all of you have had the experience of when you laid down at night and you couldn't switch your brain off. That happened to me the other night, and I started picking apart the different things that were going on. I tried to single them out and get rid of them. And I actually would have songs going on in my head. And at the same time, it was like something, the problems that I was facing earlier in the day with something. And it's weird. It's like, I look at like a computer that's got like 20 windows open. You have to go through and start closing them off one at a time until you have this empty page that God can actually use. So it really is like Velcro, just pulling away. And we need to detach ourselves from people. And I know this sounds bad. We need to detach ourselves from relationships that are difficult. And it's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't care about that person, or we don't care about the trouble that we're going through. Benevolent detachment means I care about you, but I'm giving it to God. I'll pray for you, but I'm done worrying about it and I'm done thinking about it. I'm going to try to live as carefree as I can because I know that I've given it to the ultimate person in God who can actually take care of these things. I had a friend of mine, I did it first, and then I gave her the idea, and she did it as well, but it seemed to impact her more. And then I went the whole month of June with no social media and no news of any kind. I just stopped. I went 30 days with neither one, and it was a little bit hard at first, I'll be honest with you. But once I got into it, I had so much more room in my soul and in my day for God, where I could spend time reading the Bible more, and I didn't have to think about all these different things that were going into our brain. And we forget how much we put into our brain when we're scrolling, we're swiping. Our souls weren't really meant to live like that. We have a lady who was on our staff one day came into the coffee shop and she was crying. And I walked over to her and I sat down and I said, what's wrong? And she was very upset about some shooting that took place in some state, like in New York or Washington, D.C. or something, where a bunch of people got killed. And I remember thinking, gosh, she's really a compassionate person. Man, I'm such a loser. Like, I don't even care that happened, like it doesn't affect me. Therefore, I don't have any empathy for that. So she was on one end of the spectrum. I felt horrible because I was on the far end of the spectrum. And I think there needs to be somewhere in the middle. I don't think we can take the burdens of the world and put them on our heart and go through the days weeping for all the terrible things that are going on in the world. But on the other hand, we can't just ignore it and act like it's never happened. We have to think about it and process it and give it to God and detach ourselves from it so that we can move into more of a carefree way of living. I want to read this verse to you. It comes from 1 Peter 5:7. It says, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." So that leaves us with the question, can this help us to live potentially carefree? I don't know about you, but it's been a long time since I've felt completely carefree. Sometimes we feel like that. We're in the middle of our vacation or something like that. But really what it comes down to is we're looking for a way to get some kind of detachment from the worries of the world. And God tells us right there in 1 Peter 5:7, "Cast your anxieties on me because I care for you." Okay, I care for you, therefore I'm going to take all of these worries away from you. We're really far more entangled with problems from other people and from the world than we realize. And the more exposure we have to media and social media especially, we can go through life with this heavy burden over us, with this dark cloud that seems to follow us. We really have to do all we can do to entangle ourselves from that. We've created this assumption, and this doesn't help either with our phones and with social media, that people have access to us at all times. That they can come to us. We're an open door, we're an open book at all times. And this weighs heavy on us. It's actually very harmful. Cell phones have been a major contributor to this major loss of personal space. I got a friend who's a businessman. He's a vice president or director of sales or something for like the whole country of some company. And he was telling me that he's on call all the time. Like there's never a time when he's like off. Like he can't just close the doors, the shop's closed. He's got clients overseas and in different time zones, and they just have access to him continually. And that's not the way that we are supposed to live. That's not the way our souls are going to thrive. I was in South Africa back in, I don't even know how long ago it was. The first iPhones came out. But I was playing tennis with this guy, a wealthy businessman, and he had an Apple iPhone, and he was really one of the first people I'd ever seen with one of these. In fact, I remember looking at it going, wow, that's cool. He's showing me how it all worked and everything. Up till then, we had these little cheapy little Nokias that didn't do anything. And we paid, us poor missionaries were paying, and others were paying as you go. We go to the gas station and buy prepaid minutes. And here's Mr. Moneybags over there, swiping and unlimited data and all that kind of stuff. But he and I are playing tennis. And in the middle of the match, I swear to you, I'm over there getting balls and putting them in my pocket and coming back to serve. He's standing there on the baseline looking at his phone. Now, the worst part of this is the guy actually still beat me, even in the midst of all of his distraction of looking at his phone. But it was such a turnoff, and I was thinking, man, just give me an hour of your time. We're not asking for much here. And I remember thinking, man, that's so rude and all this. And then I came back to America a few months later, and I realized that was the norm. That's what everybody was doing. Everybody was swiping and staring at their phones the whole time. It hadn't hit South Africa yet like it was going on in America. And I realized, too, that now I have become that person. I have become the person who's sitting there staring at my phone and not giving my full attention to people like I want to and like I should. So that is definitely something that I am trying to be more engaged with the people that I'm sitting with. So you're asking yourself or saying to yourself, how is it right to just let these things go? Am I being a good Christian if I'm saying, Okay, I care about you, but I'm not going to think about it anymore. Well, it sounds impossible to do. And if you might be saying, well, you don't know my world. You don't know all the problems that we're going through. But I want to remind you this. How is it right to just let things go? Well, first of all, you're not God. Okay, very simple. You're not God, so you can't handle the burdens, and you shouldn't shoulder the burdens of everybody and every problem that comes across your page. I like the expression. It says, number one, there is a God in heaven, and number two, you're not him. Okay, so keep that in mind as you start dealing with your problems, with other people's problems. Get ready to offload those and detach those. You need to practice release. We need to practice creating soul space for ourselves. It's literally letting God come in and cultivate our heart. Let him just soften it so that he can speak to us, and you can hand all of those things over to him. There was a movie years ago called Field of Dreams. I'm sure most of you guys would remember that if you're anywhere near my age, where they're building that baseball field in the cornfield, and they kept hearing this voice, if you build it, he will come. Well, I think it's like that with our hearts too. If you open up space for him, he will come. If you make it a soft heart, he's going to come and he's going to speak to you. So pause and detach. Okay, that's my first word for you, or my final words for you. Pause and detach, or pause and release. Okay, just remember those two things. And as you get your God pause sticker, if you want one, if you're not coming on Tuesday night, come by. I'll hook you up with one. They're super cool. Just little things you can stick places, just to remember to stop, pause. Let God take care of all the burdens and all the worries that you have. And we're going to slowly but surely, we're going to get our life back as the book describes. So thanks for joining us today. And we're going to be in person Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. And we are going to be also meeting on Wednesday morning at 6:30 for pastries and coffee. And I hope you can come and join us for one of those.